The massive station floated in the darkness between stars, a monument built by civilizations so old that even their names had become legends. Every 1,000 years, the greatest minds from across the galaxy gathered here for what the ancient texts called the convergence of seekers. They came to attempt what none had ever accomplished. They came to solve the riddle of. Stood near the back of the observation deck, holding her daughter's hand as ships from 100 different worlds docked at the station's countless ports. She was 34 years old, a junior cultural assigned to witness this historic gathering on behalf of Earth. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 30 years ago, and they were still considered children in the eyes of the galactic community. Most species barely acknowledged their existence. Her daughter Lily was 7 years old, with brown hair that refused to stay in its ponytail and curious eyes that wanted to see everything at once. Had not planned to bring her to such an important event, but her arrangements had fallen through at the last moment, and the diplomatic corps had assured her that children were welcome. The convergence was, after all, a celebration of knowledge and curiosity. What could be more appropriate than a curious child? The station itself was a wonder beyond anything had ever seen. It had been constructed 40,000 years ago by the archivists, a species of crystalline beings who had dedicated their entire existence to preserving the knowledge of the universe. They did not create or invent. They simply remembered. Every discovery, every theorem, every poem and song from every civilization that had ever risen and fallen was stored within their collective memory. And at the center of their great station, they kept the riddle. Had read about it during her journey here. The riddle of had been discovered floating in the void between galaxies, carved into a monolith of what scientists called crystallized time. No one knew who they had been. No records of their civilization existed anywhere in the galaxy. They had left behind only this single artifact, this puzzle that had consumed the intellectual energy of countless species for 40. The riddle itself seemed simple enough, had memorized it during the long voyage. I am asked without words. I am answered without sound. I stand at the threshold but never come in. What am I? Philosophers had written millions of pages interpreting those 3 sentences. Mathematicians had developed entirely new branches of logic trying to decode their meaning. Theologians had built religions around them. And yet the monolith had never responded to any answer. It simply waited, patient and silent, for someone to understand. Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why is everyone so quiet?" Looked around the observation deck. Beings of every imaginable shape and form surrounded them, but Lily was right. Despite the thousands of delegates present, the atmosphere was almost reverential. Voices were hushed. Movements were slow and deliberate. It reminded of visiting a cathedral back on Earth. "They're thinking very hard about something important," explained. "There's a puzzle here that nobody has ever solved, and everyone wants to be the one to figure it out." Lily considered this information with the seriousness that only a child could muster. "Is it a hard puzzle?" "Very hard. People have been trying to solve it for a very, very long time. Longer than I've been alive." Smiled. "Much longer than that, sweetheart. Longer than anyone has been alive." The opening ceremonies began with a procession of archivists floating through the central chamber, their crystalline bodies catching the light and scattering it into countless rainbows. They moved in perfect unison, a dance that had been performed the same way for thousands of years. Behind them came representatives from the oldest civilizations in the known galaxy, though with their iridescent scales and towering frames. Who existed as a collective consciousness spread across thousands of identical bodies. The mathematical geniuses who communicated entirely through equations and proofs. Humanity's delegation was small. Just Lily and a handful of other observers tucked away in a corner where they would not draw attention. They had not been invited to participate in the actual attempts to solve the riddle. They were here merely to watch and learn. The High Archivist, a being called who had presided over the last 12 convergences, drifted to the center of the chamber. When spoke, The words seemed to form directly in its mind, bypassing language entirely. "We gather once more to seek understanding," intoned. "The riddle of has waited 40,000 years for an answer. Perhaps this gathering will be the one to provide it. Perhaps we will wait another 1,000 years. Either way, we honor the seekers who came before us, and we open the path for those who will come after." The monolith was revealed then, rising from the floor on an anti-gravity platform. Caught her breath. It was beautiful in a way she had not expected. The crystallized time seemed to flow and shift even while remaining perfectly still, as if it existed in multiple moments simultaneously. The riddle was carved into its surface in symbols that somehow made sense in every language at once. "I am asked without words. I am answered without sound. I stand at the threshold but never come in." The delegate approached first, as tradition demanded. Their species had been attempting to solve the riddle for over 30,000 years, and they considered themselves the foremost authorities on its meaning. The delegate spoke for nearly an hour, presenting a complex theory involving quantum states and the nature of observation. The monolith listened in silence, and when finished, it remained dark and unchanged. The went next, their collective voice speaking of death and the boundaries between existence and non-existence. It was a moving interpretation, almost poetic in its approach, but the monolith gave no response. One by one, the ancient civilizations presented their theories. Some were mathematical, others philosophical. A few were spiritual, speaking of gods and transcendence. Each one was brilliant in its own way, representing the accumulated wisdom of species that had been exploring the stars while humans were still learning to walk upright. And each one failed. Watched it all with growing fascination. She had expected the proceedings to be dry and academic, but there was something deeply moving about witnessing so many different minds struggling with the same question. They all wanted to understand. They all wanted to connect with whatever ancient intelligence had left this message for them to find. Lily had fallen asleep against her shoulder about halfway through the proceedings. Did not blame her. The theoretical discussions were far beyond what a 7-year-old could follow. But as the session drew to a close and delegates began to disperse for the evening, Lily stirred and looked up at her mother with sleepy eyes. "Did anyone solve the puzzle?" she asked. "Not yet," said. "They'll try again tomorrow." Lily yawned and snuggled closer. Maybe they're thinking too hard. Smiled and kissed the top of her daughter's head. Maybe they are, sweetheart, maybe they are. She had no idea how right her daughter would turn out to be. The second day of the convergence began with renewed energy and fresh theories. Had found temporary quarters in one of the station's residential sections, a small room with a window that looked out at the endless stars. Lily had slept well and woken up full of questions about the aliens she had seen the day before. The tall, sparkly one looked like a Christmas tree, Lily announced over breakfast. "Can we go see them up close today?" Considered the request. The formal sessions would not begin for several more hours, and she had been told that delegates were welcome to explore the station's public areas. It might be good for Lily to see more of this place, to understand that the universe was far bigger and stranger than anything she could have imagined. "We can take a walk," agreed. "But you have to stay close to me and be very polite to everyone we meet." "I'm always polite," Lily said, which was only partially true. They made their way through the station's winding corridors, passing beings of every conceivable form. Some traveled in groups, discussing the previous day's proceedings in languages that translator could barely follow. Others moved alone, lost in thought. A few acknowledged the human woman and her child with nods or gestures of greeting, but most paid them no attention at all. Lily was fascinated by everything. She wanted to know what each species ate, where they came from, and whether they had pets. Answered as best she could, drawing on the cultural briefings she had studied during the journey. But many of Lily's questions had no easy answers. The galaxy was simply too vast and too diverse for anyone to understand completely. They found themselves in a garden of sorts, a large chamber filled with plants from dozens of different worlds. Some of the vegetation glowed softly. Others moved on their own, responding to stimuli that could not perceive. Lily immediately ran to examine a flower that seemed to be singing in frequencies just at the edge of human hearing. "Be gentle with it," called out. "We don't know if it's dangerous." "It's not dangerous," Lily declared with the absolute confidence of a 7-year-old. "It's just lonely. It wants someone to sing back." Was about to respond when she noticed they were not alone in the garden. A delegate stood near the entrance, watching them with an expression that might have been curiosity. The translator in his ear struggled to interpret the subtle movements of the being's scales. "You are the humans," they said. It was not a question. "Yes," replied, pulling Lily gently back to her side. "I am, and this is my daughter Lily. We are honored to be here." They made a sound that the translator interpreted as mild amusement. "Honored is an interesting word. Your species has been traveling among the stars for barely a generation. You have not yet earned the right to be honored by this gathering." Felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and a touch of anger. "We were invited to observe. We have followed all the proper protocols." "I do not question your right to be here," they clarified. "I am simply stating a fact. You are very young. Your species has much to learn." Lily had been watching this exchange with growing impatience. "That's not very nice," she announced. "My teacher says you shouldn't tell people they don't belong somewhere." They turned its attention to the child. For a moment, worried that Lily had caused a diplomatic incident. But then the alien scales shifted to a color that the translator identified as genuine interest. "Your offspring speaks directly," they observed. "This is unusual for your species, is it not? I have studied human communication patterns. You typically employ much indirection and social ceremony." "She's 7, said by way of explanation. "Children don't always follow the same rules as adults." "Interesting." The knelt down to bring itself closer to Lily's eye level, a gesture that seemed almost respectful. "Tell me, young human, what do you think of the riddle of—" Lily shrugged. "I don't know, I fell asleep." "But you heard the riddle itself." "Mommy told it to me. Something about asking without words and standing at a door." The scales flickered rapidly. "And what did you think when you heard it?" Lily considered the question carefully, the way she always did when she suspected an adult was testing her. "I thought it sounded like a game, like when you say something but you don't really mean the thing you're saying." "Explain this further." "Like knock-knock jokes," Lily said, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. "You knock but you don't really knock. You just say the words. And then you stand at the door the whole time even though nobody really has a door. It's pretend." There was silent for a long moment. Watched its scales cycle through colors she had never seen before, patterns that her translator could not interpret. Finally, the alien rose to its full height and looked down at with an expression that might have been shock. "Your offspring may have just solved the great riddle," they said slowly. "Or she may have said nothing of importance at all. I confess I do not know which." Before could respond, they turned and strode out of the garden, moving with a speed that seemed almost urgent. Stared after it, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mommy," Lily tugged at her hand, "did I say something wrong?" "I don't think so, sweetheart," said, though she was not at all certain. "I don't think so at all." The formal sessions were scheduled to resume in 2 hours. Suddenly felt that she should be there when they did. She took Lily's hand and began walking toward the central chamber, her mind racing with possibilities she did not fully understand. The riddle had waited 40,000 years. Perhaps it had been waiting for someone exactly like Lily, someone young enough to see what all the ancient scholars had missed. Or perhaps it was all just coincidence, a child's random comment that meant nothing at all. Either way, intended to find out. The central chamber was already filling with delegates when Lily arrived. The atmosphere had changed since the previous day. There was an energy in the air, a tension that could not quite identify. She noticed that several beings were looking in her direction, and she wondered if word of the encounter in the garden had already spread. She found a seat near the front of the observation area, lifting Lily onto her lap so the child could see the monolith clearly. It stood at the center of the chamber exactly as it had before, ancient and patient and utterly unchanged. "Is that the puzzle rock?" Lily asked. "Yes, that's the one. It's pretty, it looks like it's breathing." Looked at the monolith more closely and realized that Lily was right. The crystallized time did seem to pulse gently, as if it were alive in some way she could not understand. She had not noticed this the day before. Perhaps she had not been paying close enough attention. The High Archivist drifted to the center of the chamber, and the assembled delegates fell silent. But instead of beginning the formal proceedings, turned and floated directly toward and Lily. The crowd parted to let the crystalline being pass, and felt her heart climb into her throat. "Of Earth," said, "I have been informed that your offspring spoke words in the garden that may have significance to our gathering. I would ask you to bring the child forward so that she may repeat what she said." Every eye and sensory organ in the chamber was now focused on and Lily felt frozen in place, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. But Lily seemed entirely unbothered. She wiggled off her mother's lap and walked toward with the casual confidence of a child who had not yet learned to be afraid of anything. "Hello," Lily said to the High Archivist. "You're very sparkly." A ripple of something that might have been amusement passed through the crowd. Its crystalline form flickered in a way that's translator interpreted as gentle warmth. "Thank you, young one. I am told that you have an interesting thought about the riddle of, would you share it with us?" Lily nodded and pointed at the monolith. "Can you read me the puzzle again? I want to make sure I remember it right." Projected the words into the air above the monolith, the ancient symbols glowing softly. "I am asked without words. I am answered without sound. I stand at the threshold but never come in." Lily studied the words carefully, her lips moving as she read them to herself. Then she looked up with a bright smile. "It's a knock-knock joke," she said. The chamber erupted into confusion. Delegates began speaking all at once, their translators struggling to keep up with the flood of languages and concepts. Rushed forward and knelt beside her daughter, uncertain whether to be proud or terrified. "Lily, sweetheart, what do you mean?" "A knock-knock joke," Lily repeated patiently, as if she were explaining something very simple to someone very slow. "You know, knock-knock. Who's there? You ask but you don't really knock. You answer but you don't really tell them who you are until the end. And you stay outside the door the whole time because it's just for fun." Had grown very still. The High Archivist's form was pulsing rapidly, cycling through colors and patterns that had never seen before. When spoke again, the words came slowly, as if the ancient being were processing something entirely unexpected. "The knock is spoken, not performed. Asked without words, for the verbal knock replaces the physical action." "Yeah," Lily agreed. "The answer is a setup, not a true response. Answered without sound, for the meaning is hidden until the final moment. That's how it works. And the person remains at the threshold throughout, never entering, because the entire exchange is a game played at the doorway." "It's supposed to be funny," Lily added helpfully, "but grown-ups don't always think so." The monolith began to glow. Stumbled backward as light poured from the ancient structure, washing over the chamber in waves of gold and silver. The crystallized time seemed to sing, a frequency that bypassed her ears and resonated directly in her bones. All around her, delegates were reacting with shock and wonder. Several of the bodies collapsed entirely, their collective consciousness apparently overwhelmed by what was happening. Floated toward the monolith, drawn by the light. "In 40,000 years," the High Archivist said, "the monolith has never responded to any answer, Not once, not to any of the thousands of theories and interpretations we have offered. The light grew brighter, and the monolith began to open. Its surface split along lines that had been invisible before, revealing a chamber within that glowed with the same strange radiance. The child was correct, continued, and thought she heard something like tears in the crystalline being's voice. The answer was never meant to be found through logic or philosophy or mathematics. It was a joke, a simple, playful joke, waiting 40,000 years for someone innocent enough to see it. Lily tugged at sleeve. "Mommy, did I do something good?" Pulled her daughter into a fierce hug, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, sweetheart, you did something very, very good." All around them, the greatest minds in the galaxy stared at the opened monolith and the little human girl who had succeeded where they had all failed. And for the first time in 40,000 years, the riddle had been solved. The answer had been there all along. It had just taken a child to see it. The light from the monolith slowly faded into a soft glow, and the assembled delegates pressed forward to see what lay within. Kept Lily close to her side, worried that the child might be crushed in the surge of curious beings, but raised a crystalline appendage, and the crowd fell back immediately. "The child will approach first," declared. "She has earned this right." Hesitated. Everything in her wanted to protect Lily, to keep her away from this ancient alien artifact that no one truly understood. But Lily was already walking forward, her small hand slipping free of her mother's grasp. She moved with the fearlessness of the very young, approaching the monolith as if it were just another interesting thing to explore. Inside the open chamber, a holographic display flickered to life. Images began to form, shapes and colors that resolved into figures unlike anything had ever seen. They were beings of light and flowing energy, their forms constantly shifting but somehow conveying warmth and welcome. These, realized with a shock, were the creators of the riddle, the ancient ones who had vanished from the universe before any current civilization had even begun. The hologram spoke, and like words, the meaning formed directly in its mind, bypassing language entirely. "To whoever solves our puzzle, we offer our greetings across the vast distance of time. We are and we have been gone from your universe for longer than you can imagine. But before we departed, we wanted to leave something behind, a gift for those who would come after us." The images shifted, showing scenes from an ancient civilization at its peak. They had built wonders that made even the archivist's great station look primitive by comparison. They had traveled between galaxies, manipulated the fabric of space and time, and achieved a level of technology that bordered on magic. And yet the images did not focus on their achievements. Instead, they showed the at play. They showed children running through gardens of impossible flowers, their laughter echoing across worlds. They showed families gathering to share meals and stories. They showed friends playing games that involved nothing but words and imagination. In all their power and glory, they had never forgotten how to have fun. "We reached the end of what science and logic could offer us," the hologram continued. "We understood the mathematics of the universe. We had mapped every force and particle, and we found that knowledge alone was not enough. It could not sustain us. It could not give our existence meaning." Lily had sat down cross-legged in front of the display, watching with the rapt attention she usually reserved for her favorite cartoons. Moved to stand beside her, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "What saved us was play," the hologram said. "The simple, purposeless joy of games and jokes and laughter. We discovered that the highest form of intelligence is not the ability to solve complex problems. It is the ability to find delight in existence itself, to play without purpose, to laugh without reason, to ask questions not because you need answers, but because the asking itself is fun." The images showed the creating the riddle. They worked together, these ancient beings, giggling and teasing each other as they crafted the puzzle that would outlast their entire civilization. They were having fun. The most powerful species in the history of the universe, and they were playing like children. We designed this riddle to find others like us, the hologram explained. Those who approached it with only logic would find only silence. Those who sought power or knowledge would receive nothing. But those who remembered how to play, who could look at a puzzle and see a game rather than a problem to be solved, they would be the ones to open this door. The delegate stepped forward, its scales rippling with complex emotions. Why? It demanded. Why go to such lengths for a joke? What purpose does it serve? The hologram seemed to consider the question. That is precisely the point. It serves no purpose, and that is what makes it valuable. Your civilizations have spent 40,000 years searching for meaning in our words. You built philosophies and religions around them. You sought hidden wisdom and secret knowledge. But the only wisdom we wanted to share is this. Not everything needs to have a purpose. Sometimes the most profound truth is that there is no truth at all. Sometimes the answer is simply to laugh. Lily raised her hand as if she were in school. Can I tell you a knock-knock joke? The hologram's shifting form seemed to smile. We would be honored, young one. Knock-knock. Who is there? Banana. Banana who? Knock-knock. Who is there? Banana. Banana who? Knock-knock. Saw where this was going and tried to intervene. Lily, maybe we should. Who is there? The hologram asked, and could have sworn it was grinning. Orange. Orange who? Orange, you glad I didn't say banana? The hologram burst into laughter, not the polite chuckle of an adult humoring a child, but genuine, delighted laughter that rang through the chamber and resonated in the minds of every being present. All around, delegates were exchanging confused looks. The greatest minds in the galaxy, and they did not understand why anyone would find this funny. But Lily understood, and the reaching across 40,000 years of time understood too. This is what we hope to find, the hologram said when its laughter faded. This moment, this connection, a child sharing a joke with beings who have been dead for longer than your stars have burned. This is the gift we wanted to give, the knowledge that somewhere in the universe, the joy we felt still lives on. The display began to fade, the images of the growing dim. But before they disappeared entirely, the hologram spoke one final time. Remember us not for what we built or what we discovered. Remember us for this. Remember that we laughed. And then they were gone, and the chamber fell silent. The days that followed were unlike anything had ever experienced. News of the riddle's solution spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by communications networks that spanned thousands of worlds. Within hours, Lily had become the most famous human being in history. Within days, she had become something else entirely. A symbol, a proof that humanity belonged among the stars after all. The archivists requested permission to record everything Lily knew about jokes and games and playful language. They were fascinated by concepts that humans took for granted. Puns, riddles, wordplay, the simple back and forth of knock-knock jokes that children learned almost as soon as they could speak. None of these things existed in quite the same way in other cultures. Other species had humor, of course. They had games and entertainment. But the specific human tradition of playing with language just for the fun of it, of asking questions not to receive answers but to set up punchlines, this was something special. Something that had been rare in the galaxy for a very long time. Visited in her quarters the night before she was scheduled to return to Earth. The High Archivist moved slowly, its crystalline form dim and contemplative. We have studied your species for 30 years, said. We your wars and your weapons. We documented your struggles and your failures. We noted your short and your limited technology. We considered you primitive, unimportant, a footnote in the great history of the galaxy. Said nothing. She had heard similar sentiments expressed by others over the past few days, usually followed by some kind of apology or reassessment. We were wrong, continued. Not because your daughter solved the riddle, Any child might have done so, given the right circumstances. We were wrong because we forgot what the riddle was trying to teach us. What do you mean? Form pulsed softly. They were the most advanced civilization in the history of the universe. They could reshape reality itself, and what they chose to leave behind was a joke. A simple, silly joke about standing at doors and playing with words. We interpreted this as a test of intelligence. We thought they were asking us to prove ourselves worthy of their legacy, but that was never the point. What was the point? The point was that they wanted us to play. They wanted us to laugh. They wanted to know that somewhere in the universe, after they were gone, there would still be beings who remembered that existence does not have to be serious all the time. And for 40,000 years, we failed them. We approached their gift with solemnity and reverence when they wanted us to approach it with joy. Lily was asleep in the next room, exhausted by all the attention she had received. Looked at the door that separated them, and felt a fierce protective love surge through her. She doesn't really understand what she did, said. To her, it was just a game, just something obvious that the grown-ups had missed. Perhaps that is why she succeeded, replied. She did not approach the riddle as a problem to be solved. She approached it as something to play with. That is a form of wisdom that many of us have lost. The High Archivist drifted toward the viewport, gazing out at the stars. We archivists have preserved the knowledge of 10,000 civilizations. We remember everything. But somewhere along the way, we forgot how to forget. We forgot how to be surprised. We forgot how to find delight in simple things. Your daughter reminded us of what we had lost. She's just a child, said. She tells the same 3 knock-knock jokes over and over. She laughs at the same punchlines every time. And that, said, is precisely what makes her special. She can find joy in repetition. She can laugh at the same thing 100 times and still be delighted. We thought such simplicity was a weakness. We were wrong. The departure from the station was a far cry from the quiet arrival had experienced just days before. Representatives from dozens of worlds lined the docking bay to see them off. The delegate who had been so dismissive in the garden now bowed deeply before Lily, a gesture of profound respect in their culture. I have studied your knock-knock jokes, they said. I do not understand why they are funny, but I wish to learn. Perhaps you will teach me. Lily nodded seriously. You have to practice. It takes a while to get good at telling them. I will practice, they promised, for as long as it takes. The journey back to Earth gave time to process everything that had happened. She watched Lily play with holographic toys in the ship's recreation area, building castles and knocking them down, giggling at the chaos she created. This ordinary child, this unremarkable little girl, she had done something that the greatest minds in the galaxy had failed to accomplish for 40,000 years, and she had done it by being exactly what she was, a child who knew how to play. Thought about what awaited them on Earth, the interviews and the attention and the endless questions. People would want to know how Lily had solved the riddle. They would look for some special talent, some unique gift that set her apart. But the truth was simpler than that. Lily had not solved the riddle because she was special. She had solved it because she was ordinary, because she was young enough to still see the world as a place full of games and jokes and fun. They had understood something that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Intelligence was not the highest achievement. Knowledge was not the greatest goal. The true measure of a civilization was not what it could build or discover, but whether it could still remember how to laugh. Humanity had only been among the stars for a single generation. They were still learning, still growing, still finding their place in the vast community of worlds. But they had something that many of the ancient civilizations had lost along the way. They still knew how to play. They still told knock-knock jokes to their children. They still found delight in simple things. And perhaps, thought as she watched her daughter laugh at her own silly games, that was the greatest gift humanity had to offer the universe. Not technology or wisdom or power, just the simple, precious ability to find joy in being alive. Knock knock. Who's there? The future. The future who? The future belongs to those who remember how to laugh.